Okay, so here we're going to demonstrate our old style cylinder clamp that we used to use, the squeeze clamp. This clamp operates by placing it over top of the cylinder valve and onto the cylinder valve by mating the nozzle of the valve into the receiving end of the clamp. It then gets closed by hand and squeezed to lock on. At this point, the operator would open up the cylinder for filling the chemical and then open up the fill line, and we're going to use nitrogen to demonstrate this as not to use chemical. So the operator would then, as soon as he would open this, the filling process can take place. When the filling cycle is done, then the operator's job is to close the fill valve, close the valve on the cylinder completely, vent out any excess pressure that's in the clamp, and then he can remove the clamp. The problem we've had many times over again is the operator would fill the cylinder. The cylinder has just been filled with chemical, and the operator is capable of removing the clamp without closing the valve, and what happens is all the chemical inside the cylinder just blows out and creates a big safety issue and a mess and a downtime, and it's very costly for the company. So I can demonstrate that now. The valve is open as if the operator would accidentally forget about the valve being open and remove the clamp. So that was just nitrogen. If you can imagine that being full of chemical and just blowing out all over the place, it's a very bad situation. Okay, here is the old clamp which I just demonstrated, and this is the new pneumatic filling clamp that has been put together by myself and other members of our team to alleviate the problems that we were having as I just demonstrated. This clamp is pneumatically operated with a cylinder. It closes onto the cylinder valve in the same fashion as did the squeeze, but it's all pneumatically controlled through the pneumatics in the control box and the pressure of the nitrogen and then what's in the line. So to operate this, the operator takes the cylinder clamp, the pneumatic clamp, and he puts it over the valve onto the stem of the valve just like as before, and then to close the cylinder he pushes the green button to clamp. Now that pressure you hear is the nitrogen automatically coming on. This is the testing clamp for the outside, the QC. That's a standard function of the box, of this control box, to keep pressure against the valve so chemical doesn't come out when we do our test. So that's on a timed feature through the pneumatic controls in the box. So now that there's pressure in the clamp, and if the valve was to be opened, if there's any pressure reading in this clamp through the sensor that's inside this box, I cannot release this clamp, as I will demonstrate. Clamp off button being pressed, and the clamp will not remove at all until I vent out the system. Once I vent the system out through the side of the box here, I can now release the clamp. So if this cylinder, which has pressure in it now currently, was left open, which I can demonstrate, I will open my cylinder. Assuming this is a full cylinder of chemical and pressure, if I were to leave this valve open and try to remove the clamp, it will not remove. I have to close my cylinder completely, vent out the clamp. Now the clamp will remove, thus eliminating any safety issues as we had in the past with the old squeeze clamp. Now onto the filling side, where we fill chemical into the cylinder. It's a very similar clamp design. Matter of fact, it's the exact same same clamp design. The only thing that's different is the pneumatics that's in the control box. There's a lot fewer pneumatics in this. The pressure in the clamp is sensed through the pressure transducer which is multifunctional. It is now serving as a purpose to measure and detect the pressure that's in this clamp, as well as it measures the pressure that we put in our cylinder at the end of the filling cycle, and that is done through our PLC, the control unit for the entire filling cycle. So this transducer is serving two purposes, and that is to do pressure checking and monitoring of the clamp, and also making sure that we have the correct pressure in our cylinder at the end of the cycle, fill cycle. So that being said, this cylinder can now be, this clamp can be put onto the cylinder for filling, and it goes on in a similar fashion, same way as before. Green button to clamp on, the cylinder clamps onto the valve, we're ready to go. The operator can now open his cylinder and the filling cycle can begin. So the filling is going on with the chemical into the can at the end of the cycle. The filling cycle is done. So at the end of the filling cycle, the operator is supposed to close the valve on the cylinder and leave the filling valve remains open so we can vent out the pressure that's in the entire line. Once that is done, then the operator can push the red button and release the clamp. Now, at the end of the filling cycle, should the operator mistakenly forget to close the valve on the cylinder and attempts to remove the clamp, the pressure in the cylinder is being read by the transducer, telling the control box to not release the clamp. So I'm here now with pressure in the cylinder. I have the valve open, line being fed, and I attempt to remove the clamp, and nothing will happen. The operator at this point will realize that something's wrong. I forgot to do something. He will then obviously go through a checklist, find that his valve is left open, pressure's in the valve. Even by closing the valve, it's not enough to stop the valve or the clamp from coming off. It still has the pressure in it. It needs to be vented out. So at that point, he opens the valve, vents out the pressure that's in the line. He already closed the cylinder, then the clamp can come off.